keep on kissing babies and hugging fat girls. You are a sniveling little suck-up sellout full of suffering succotash, son.
It's me, Austin! Oh, son of a bitch! What? It's me, Austin! It was me all along, Austin!
And you t-shirts are too tight too, Billy! And you book a match with me against Ryan Keelan! Look at me! I'm a total package! I will rip him apart! I'm pissed now!
Where to, Stephanie?
WrestleRoasts on ad-free shows and ATC. Welcome everybody to WrestleRoasts, specifically the roast of Abdullah the Butcher. We're fucking pumped because Zach Amico is here with us today. Zach, you remember from the Bray Wyatt Fiend show. He's also from Real Ass Podcast and a bunch of other shit. Zach, thanks for coming back on, buddy.
Thank you guys for having me. I love the show, so I'm excited to be a part of it, man.
Yeah, man. Anytime, dude. Kill it. We also got our old faithful Zach, Mike Lawrence, Robert Karpelis, and Sergeant Slaughterhouse. Scotty, is that like a little bit of a man bun in the back?
Oh, yeah, I got a mullet.
Oh, God. Oh.
Mike says, oh, God, one of the most horrific looking people ever. Oh, God, you still look great with a haircut that people would start shooting at me if I had it.
Scott's going for the Matt Damon in the last duel.
All right, Brian Pillman Jr.
My favorite band.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's more Carl's Jr. than Brian Pillman Jr. But
Your Aunt Linda cut that for you?
She's a good lady.
Anyway, guys, we're excited.
Is Abdullah the Butcher the guy that gave Scott his haircut?
Well, guys, we've got a lot of fun shows coming up. Next week, we're doing the roast of Alexa Bliss, the roast of Kane, the roast of Scott Steiner, the roast of Cyndi Lauper. Who do we have after that, Mike?
I don't remember.
All right.
Randy Orton is our other November one.
All right, Randy Orton, and get ready for a couple other ones, guys. If you're a member of the $5 tier, we're off this week, but then we're doing the Undertaker New Day Netflix movie, horror movie, plus fan questions, the roast of Nick Gage, World War III, an MLW review, a show that Robert booked. We're going to be commenting on QT Marshall, the wrestler, for Thanksgiving, the roast of Ryback, TLC review, which could be a watch along. We're going to see how we can do it, what we can do with that. Jingle All the Way 2 off day one.
And then they announced today they're not doing TLC this year.
What are they doing?
There's just not going to be a December pay-per-view. It's going to go straight from,
because they're doing day one.
It's Survivor Series to day one. They announced today the Chicago pay-per-view they were going to do isn't going to happen. So
wow. All right. So we have an open spot, which will.
Is that because of ticket sales? Because if they can't sell out Chicago, there's something fucking wrong.
It's because during last year's TLC, 2 of the wrestlers were killed.
That was Money in the Bank, I believe.
You're right.
Or the swamp match.
But they survived the next day, so they're okay.
If you're on our $10 tier, you get something to sports entertainment with. Me and Robert broke down Monday Night Raw this week. Next week, Rob will be doing Raw. I will be doing Crown Jewel. Leave a 5-star review in the comments. Join YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Subscribe to all our pages. And T-shirts are on both Robert and my Pro Wrestling Tees page. Now, Zach, we gave you an entire October list of wrestlers to pick from, and you picked Abdullah the Butcher. So we'll start out with Brightside with Zach. Zach, what do you love about Abdullah?
I love the territory guys. I love the guys that never stayed anywhere too long and could be a huge presence and kind of tour with it and never have to change it. I think it sounds like the most fun version of wrestling was that you were never in a town for more than 6 months. And I love that he could be gone for a little while, come back, and be just as scary, and they never had to repackage him. And I just feel like he's one of those guys that they never managed to ruin.
Well, he couldn't stay around long enough to be ruined.
Yeah. And he's the fact that he could have great matches like Andre is such a testament to like his staying power, and like when you look at how long he had those brawl matches,
40 years, right? I think it's 40 years he was wrestling. Like
it's like him and Gypsy Joe were having a competition for who they could disease and how long they could wrestle.
Oh, there's literally like a "Yo Mama So Old" joke. She refereed a match between Abdullah and Gypsy Joe.
Hey, Gypsy, what does Gypsy Joe have?
New Jack's knife in his stomach.
Dude, that is one of the most uncomfortable fucking things ever.
Mike's on fire today.
He's I mean, when I was doing my little bit of Abdullah the Butcher research that I did this week, you know, this is before I even was into wrestling. Like, he was one of the guys who legitimately made me wonder if it was real or not. Like, I would go to the pharmacy and there'd be magazines. You know how there was like the WWF magazine, but then there was, you know, the Pro Wrestling Illustrated. It was like the black and white, and it was always him like with black blood coming out of his head. And I was like, all right, well, all this other shit may be fake, but this guy seems like a real psychopath. Great gimmick, great look. Biggest carny ever. I really do think he's the biggest carny we've ever covered. So take that as a positive or negative, depending on how you think about carnies. It's probably a little bit of both for everybody. He's an argument for more crazy guys in wrestling. I did watch his match with Terry Funk, was really great, even though Terry Funk does like 90% of the work in the match.
That's funny you say that, because Terry Funk, I read that Terry Funk said that one of his matches with Abdullah the Butcher is one of his top 3 matches he's ever had.
Yeah, it's a really good match, and it's Terry Funk wrestling himself. Like, if you watch it, you're just like, all right, this guy's like, yeah, it's not Shawn Michaels selling for Hulk Hogan blatant, but it's up there. Kayfabe, Wrestling Observer, and WWE Hall of Fame, one of the few guys who got in the WWE Hall of Fame without being, I think, ever wrestling in the company, plus championships all over the place, All Japan, Stampede, Georgia Championship Wrestling. Scott, what do you think about Abdullah?
Well, I never knew much about him other than I knew Zach really liked him. I think Zach's mentioned him to me a few times when I've seen him. And so I thought that meant, you know, like, oh, he's a hardcore guy, but he's super swell, like Zach. Turns out he's a giant piece of shit, but we'll get to that. He visually looks, you know, that part, whatever that part is. You know, a death, I think, is the role he's playing.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I can't believe this is real, but we not only got a handicapper, but we got the best ever. So I got to ask, how are you so good at handicapping these games? I mean, 4-0, that's quite a streak already.
Well, you know, let's talk about every pick I've given this year in the NFL as an example. 23-8. Every pick I've given this year. 4 weeks in the bag, 23-8. There's nobody in the country that can match what I do, but I always make sure, because anybody, Conrad, could make up anything. They could tell you and blow smoke and tell you, oh, I'm the greatest. But I am independently monitored and documented, so nobody could ever question what I say and go, I don't believe it. I send every pick to an independent monitoring and documentation service that has to get the pick before the game goes off and then publishes it after the game goes off so anybody can see what I gave. And those picks for the year, every NFL pick so far, 23-8. And I think it's because I do more homework than anybody else. You know, the average guy or gal watching this podcast, they don't have time. They have a career, they have jobs. They might read the newspaper or go online and see something, but they don't have time 80 hours a week to study the games. That's what I do. And I have a crew of guys behind me, my consultants, who every week we get together 3 times a week and they throw their ideas at me. I throw my ideas at them. And then I pick the final 5 plays on Saturday and Sunday in college and pro football. So, I mean, I've got a great team behind me too, but we're all doing together hundreds of hours of homework. So you don't have to. It's all at VegasWinners.com.
I don't know about you guys, but I'm going to VegasWinners.com right now. Let's win some money.
But yeah, he looks exactly like he's supposed to look, I guess. Truly frightening. You're right. It does feel real with him. Part of it is because it kind of is in some moments. And also the fact that he was never on a main stage, but he was on the covers of magazines and stuff. I'm talking about like in the late 90s and stuff. It
Right.
let me know he was it was like, oh, the only reason they're not signing him is because he's real. That's what it felt like, as a wrestling fan. It's like, well, he's clearly popular enough to be everywhere. It's just so they must have banned him from being in the WWF. That's what you think is yeah, I heard he was huge in Japan. I heard he was like one of the first people from overseas to make over $1 million in Japan. Like he became a millionaire because of his career over there. Really big deal. Apparently people would like run away from him in the streets, which I'm sure he loved. So yeah, that's all I got to say about him. I don't know much about him.
Mike, what's your bright side on Abdullah?
I mean, I think, yeah, it's an impressive career. Like, he started in 1958, and it's still like, that's a black guy in 1958 traveling the fucking world, traveling the South, traveling all these places and being mega over. Yes, it was to be booed at, but still, there is something about that. He's so, like, you believe him so much in terms of like, oh, this is Abdullah. He's like a real guy, that when it comes to like black history, like you just, it's weird, right? Like you don't think of him that way.
Well,
but
Kamala has a lot to say about him with black history. Kamala accuses him of not being the reason that like black guys weren't getting booked in Japan, and which I don't know if that's true or not.
But listen, Abdullah waddled so that Kamala could also waddle. All right, so
that Kamala could hop.
No, I mean, I'm just saying, it's like we always hear of like the same three guys, and one of them because it's Rock's dad, but it's like that in itself deserves to be acknowledged and respected. And I mean, the fact that it's even if you never heard of him as a wrestling fan, you know who the fuck he is. Like, and these are the kind of the guys that are fun for me, because it's like, I've never really watched a match of his, and to do the research and to find out how long he's been around. The guy's 80 now. I mean, that's crazy. Like, and
he was born in 1941.
Yeah, born in 41. Yeah.
Wow.
And I just watched like a documentary on him today, and he comes from like a family of 8 kids. That when he started wrestling in Japan, he came home and his mom was like working scrubbing floors at a funeral home, and he was like, "You're never doing this again." And then they show the mom, and she was like, "And I never did." It's like,
he died poor.
she's just scrubbing his rib house. Yeah.
And the last thing I'll say is, there is a realness to him. It's like you're waiting for like him to peel those like the grooves off his head, and that they're like actually just band-aids. But no, that's just, that guy looks like that. Like, and he's looked like that for fucking years.
Dude, you guys saw, there's an interview with him where he's just explaining how he blades. Yeah. And so he blades. Like, he doesn't like he just bleeds in front of the camera, and he's just sitting
no craft.
Yeah. He's just like, this is how it goes, and like blood is dripping down his forehead.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like, we talk now about how today's wrestlers are softer or whatever. They're definitely smarter, because look at all those old wrestlers in their, like, Dusty's forehead, all these guys with these gross fucking heads who could not.
But the argument for that, Mike, is better Abdullah's forehead than Dynamite Kid's entire body. Like, hey, if I do a few blade jobs, then maybe I won't have to fucking be a paraplegic, when I'm 40 years old or something.
Or go the Daniel Bryan way. I'll start doing the diving headbutt, then I'll just have a personality and get over, so I don't have to do that or fuck up my forehead.
Robert, what do you think about Abdullah?
Yeah, I think Zach kind of hit the nail on the head. He was one of the last great traveling carny gimmicks that was fully formed on its own. He was like Andre, in that if you were bringing Abdullah the Butcher in, you didn't need to do a hell of a lot of other work. He's one of those wrestlers that a lot of the old time wrestlers criticize the current crop of guys that, you need to think about your gimmick. You need to understand who you are. You need to be able to cut your promos, and you need to be able to wrestle in a way that aligns with who your character is. Abdullah the Butcher was fully formed, and he never would have made it in the WWF because his gimmick wouldn't have worked in Vince McMahon world. And I don't know what Vince would have turned him into. He would have been like the precursor to Mabel or something like that when he was there. So he was smart enough to make his money everywhere else. He did have a main stage when he was on WCW for a little while, but you have certain iconic images of Abdullah the Butcher. You can't think of a guy using a fork without thinking of Abdullah. I mean, he specialized in a lot of this, and he knew his limitations, and it was hardcore wrestling without falling into what became like backyard wrestling. If I'm going to smash you with light tubes and all that, it was blood and guts, but it made sense for the match. It wasn't just we're doing a stunt show. You felt like you were watching a violent, bloody, dangerous match. And if you were close to the blood, you were in fucking peril. But it was a great character. And to his credit, he's still alive. I mean, that alone makes it a bright side that Abdullah the Butcher is still alive and kicking at 80. And if somebody probably wanted to book him, he'd probably still work for you.
I was going to quickly say, when you said, what would the WWF version be? The Sultan. That's literally what it would be. And then it wouldn't get that over, and then they'd make him rub his ass in people's faces. That's exactly what would happen under Vince.
I don't know what's easier to catch hepatitis from. Zach, were you an Abdullah fan?
Yeah, because I read about him in Foley's autobiography.
Oh, I meant our producer Zach. Sorry, but yes.
I'm so sorry, buddy.
No worries. That was my bad. Producer Zach.
That's confusing. I don't really have any opinions on Abdullah the Butcher. I've only ever seen clips of him on YouTube, and he's bloody.
Well, fuck, it's great that we interrupted Zach Amico's insight to bring you Zach's.
Zach was like, I read his autobiography. No.
All right. We'll hear from Zach later to tell you to wash your hands, but
thank you.
Hey, look, I'm trying to let everybody get their shit in.
When you read the thing about him in Foley's book, did you just start going down like a rabbit hole and looking up videos and shit?
Yeah, I had like a 10-disc history of hardcore set that I got from High Spots years when I was in high school, and that had all the Memphis shit, tons of his shit, and that's how I got into that.
Nice.
And I was super. I loved him, and then also he was in Virtual Pro Wrestling too, the not stated best N64 game.
That's true. All right, well, we've said enough nice things about Abdullah the Butcher.
nicer than his funeral is going to be.
Also, just breaking news: Robert Durst sentenced to life in prison. So
yeah. Also breaking news: gonna need a therapist for watching Abdullah the Butcher matches, followed by Escape the Undertaker. What a mind fuck!
All right, let's get to the roast of Abdullah the Butcher. Zach, spin the wheel, make the deal.
Well, thank you guys for having me, man.
Well, of course.
Abdullah the Butcher was an amalgamation of foreign stereotypes to scare white people. He had curly boots like the Iron Sheik, a headdress like Sabu, and was put in an electric chair like Jimmy Snuka should have been. Abdullah looks like the only terrorist who had to buy 2 seats on the plane he's hijacking. Abdullah debuted in WCW in his 40s in a cheap pine box, which is the same way many wrestlers leave WWE. Abdullah opened up a barbecue restaurant, marking the only time one of the boys' ribs didn't end up in sexual assault. Abdullah has been managed by Gary Hart, the Grand Wizard, J.J. Dillon, Larry Sharp, Sir Oliver Humperdinck, Bearcat Wright, and countless others. He's been cornered by more middle-aged wrestlers than a transatlantic flight attendant. By the end of his career, Abdullah was a diseased shell of himself who could barely work and couldn't even get in the ring. He was like Hepatitis O'Neill. It's ironic Abdullah could fit a poker chip in the divot in his head because when you wrestled him, you were gambling with your health. But you can't say the man isn't a legend. Abdullah was such a pioneer of hardcore wrestling, he carried a fork in his gear bag when years later, most of the ECW locker room had a spoon in theirs. What can you say? At the end of the day, Abdullah the Butcher took the National Wrestling Alliance by storm with nothing but custom boots, a huge head wound, and just a little bit of crazy. Sorry, I actually wrote that one about Kerry Von Erich. Thank you.
Oh man, that was great, Zach. Great.
Good job. Robert.
Thanks for making me follow that. Appreciate it. Thanks, Dan's dog. All right. Abdullah the Butcher sounds like the kind of character that would be a major babyface at Crown Jewel. Abdullah opened a restaurant that served Chinese food and ribs. The ribs were on anyone who ate the Chinese food. Abdullah the Butcher would have been the perfect wrestler for the Attitude Era. He embraced ultra-violence, believed in edgy storylines, and had massive tits. We can't talk about Abdullah without talking about the scars. Abdullah the Butcher cut himself an inordinate amount when you realize he doesn't listen to emo music. Abdullah the Butcher's gashes on his head are so deep that he can fit quarters in there, which is nothing compared to what Sunny can fit in her gash. Abdullah claimed to be a 7th degree black belt, but in reality, it's because he needed to tie 7 black belts together to keep his pants up. He wrestled as Pussycat Pickens, which sounds like a character from an X-rated Disney movie. Abdullah's character was described as an evil Arabian sadist, or as Tony Khan calls him, Dad. Abdullah competed in Ring of Honor and New Japan Pro Wrestling, so there's a slight chance Scott may have heard of him. Terry Funk claims he had one of his 3 greatest matches ever with Abdullah, which is further proof that Terry's dementia is really starting to kick in. Abdullah the Butcher wrestled on the Heroes of Wrestling pay-per-view, which was the most disgraceful thing to ever happen to the pro wrestling business that week.
Jesus.
Abdullah the Butcher's last match ever was against Bull Buchanan, making a case for why wrestlers are better off dying in their 40s. The WWE made an Abdullah the Butcher action figure. It was so authentic that it gave kids hepatitis C. Abdullah is in a number of wrestling video games. If you push the right buttons, you can watch him do his signature move, labored breathing in the corner. And finally, Abdullah the Butcher was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, which made superstar Billy Graham want to pull out of the hall as if he were one of the needles jabbed in his ass.
Robert Karplis, everybody.
Next.
Yeah.
Today we're roasting Abdullah the Butcher, the second most infamous man to make Bruiser Brody bleed out. He was at the show the night Brody was killed and says he didn't see the murder, which I believe because there's no way Abdullah's ever been in a shower. And if he was there, he'd probably comment on the stabbing skills of Invader One. No, buddy, you got to do it like this. Yes, Abdullah the Butcher, the one innovator of violence that hasn't been canceled yet.
Oh.
His real name is Larry Shreve, and honestly, I'm upset we didn't get Larry the Butcher instead. He's still alive and 80 years old. By the way, that's not my joke. That's God's. He would put forks in people's heads and carve them up without permission, and somehow the most disgusting thing about him was that he wrestled without a shirt on. He's the manliest man who looks like there's a pussy on his forehead. He's fucked up in the head, and those grooves are so big you could probably fuck him in the head. It's disgusting. The man should have to wear a hat. His head looks like a dick that's been circumcised by Michael J. Fox. He combined the savage brutality of hardcore legends like Terry Funk and Mick Foley with the mobility of Mabel and the pulled-up pants of Steve Urkel. I don't know what's more impressive, that he was Canadian but convinced people that he was from the Sudan, or that he stabbed people with forks and convinced people that that was professional wrestling. I'm not saying he was a shitty wrestler, but the guy spent 30 years in Japan and never got a 5-star match from Dave Meltzer. Ironically, Kamala was able to take Abdullah's gimmick and give it legs. If I had to grade his wrestling ability, I'd give him a Hep C+. I mean, I was genuinely shocked that he had hepatitis C and not diabetes. What he does to his opponents in the ring is nothing compared to what he does to the insides of their livers. Abdullah should be called King of the Deathmatch because if you wrestle him, you might actually die. Hannibal from the HannibalTV.com sued him and won, saying he was the reason he lost his WWE contract. And you know, the WWE has a zero tolerance policy against hepatitis C unless you gave birth to Randy Orton. I'm pretty sure Hannibal won the case because the judge thought he was suing for brain damage. Finally, he's been accused of bleeding on several wrestlers and giving them hepatitis C, and it really, truly is shameful that he hasn't wrestled Nick Gage yet.
Mike Lawrence, everybody.
Dan, you're up, buddy.
All right, that fanfare. Abdullah the Butcher, aka the Magic Johnson of hepatitis. He grew up with nothing but the rolls on his back. He looks like the Buddha melted. There's nothing scarier than 400 pounds of mall karate. Abdullah still being alive is the only evidence we have of COVID being fake. It sucks that most of the grainy footage we have of Abdullah is from a terrible indie show or getting titty fucked by the dancing bear. He opened Abdullah the Butcher's House of Ribs and Chinese food, which sounds like the restaurant that killed Patrice. Abdullah sold ribs, chicken, egg rolls, and fried rice. The only thing he wouldn't sell is an opponent's offense. His wrestling style was Eddie Murphy getting in clump suit. He could cut everything but a promo. This is my Scott joke. He single-handedly kept the wet nap industry a root beer float. Abdullah the Butcher is how Jackson Riker pronounces Mustafa Ali. Abdullah looks like what would happen if a pumpkin came to life, but then just decomposed like a normal pumpkin. His last match was a draw against Bull Buchanan, which, you know, all I say is that if you haven't seen that match, neither have I. He's the only guy to make Mick Foley say, "Hey, bud, that's a little much." Abdullah did the unforgivable, made Hannibal a millionaire. His forehead so cut up that QT thought it was his wife's wrist. He looks like he's starring in an Aladdin-themed episode of My 600-Pound Life. His finishing move was the Sudanese meat cleaver, which is also what Moolah called her pussy. And finally, imagine getting Hep C from Abdullah instead of Pam Anderson. Well, at least I got to fuck Pam Anderson versus, well, at least I got to almost die at that high school. That's it for me.
All right, Scotty, take him home.
All right, Abdullah the Butcher, or as I like to call him, the tragic real-life story of the Kool-Aid Man. He bleeds Hep C and drinks High C. I haven't seen so many infected scars since a homeless shelter held auditions for The Lion King.
so great.
His body shape is Patrick Star. Instead of paying attention to any of his matches this week, I just played the game Cellulite or Cheese Grater Scar. All right, he moves like he's dealing with a hernia, a rash, and shit in his pants. He looks like a thumb on the hand of a firework accident victim. His boots curl at the tip because he can't bend over to cut his toenails. Sometimes he'd enter the ring eating a chicken raw, and by raw, I mean without a condom. He looks like a beanbag chair with googly eyes on it. If beanies come out when you rub a lamp, Abdullah comes out when you rub a gas can. He looks like a gas station attendant and the monster the gas station attendant warns you about. as a black performer, if Vince got a hold of him, he'd have been Abdullah the Butler. He would tie razors like to the tips of his fingers, kind of like Freddy Krueger. But if Freddy Krueger haunts dreams, Abdullah haunts diabetic comas. He's Jason Voorhees if the lake Jason drowned in was at that camp from the movie Heavyweights. And finally, I wanted to make a joke about him being one of the Scream killers, but his fingers are too fat to dial a phone.
Oh man, the roast of Abdullah the Butcher. That was a good one.
That was fun.
Yeah, we did all right.
That was fun,
great.
guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Zach. Zach, you're welcome
Great
to
job,
stay
Zach.
on, or if you have to go.
How much longer do you guys do?
Well, we go
Dude,
till
we
like
go
7:30
forever. We
usually.
just bitch and moan.
All right, I'm actually gonna head out then. I apologize.
I'll see you later, man. Great.
Thank
No,
you
I
guys
get
so
that,
much for
right?
having me. I really
Oh, you
appreciate
did great. Thank
No,
you.
you're the
Hey,
best,
what do you
man.
want to plug, by the way?
Oh, yeah,
Real
I'm
Ass
sorry, let me-
Podcast.
Yeah,
Snankfest
please
coming up in November.
check out Real Ass Podcast, Bye Guys with Ian Finance, Zach Amico's Midnight Spook Show, doing a live show at the Stand on Halloween, 7 p.m.
Very
And
fun.
as always, please check out Catalyst Wrestling. We're up on Tubi now. We're on YouTube. We're on Gas Digital Network. And please check us out. Having a ton of fun taping matches with them.
All right, Zach, we're gonna check that out. Thanks again for doing it, man.
Thank you guys so
man.
much for
You're
having
the
me.
greatest.
Everybody be safe.
So
Love you,
great.
buddy. Peace out.
Thank you, buddy.
Zach Amico, everybody. God, he's funny, man.
Yeah.
He's so funny. Also, a really great wrestling manager. Like if you do search out his wrestling stuff, his promos are unbelievable. So yeah, do
No.
that too.
AEW. Do you have enough managers yet? Hey, let's get to our show in hell this week.
Amico is too young for them.
Both our show and hell and our tales from the indies are Abdullah centered this week. There was no episode of Dynamite, so we kind of doubled it up on some other segments. The thing I made you guys watch is what was more awkward, Abdullah in the chair or Abdullah coming out of the box? I mean, basically WCW was just like an episode of Addams Family during this period. Like it really was just so like, and I watched the electrocution video, and it's so weird seeing Jim Ross like have to phone it in for this, like because current JR would have just torn this fucking torn this thing apart. And my big note is I'm glad Foley didn't get Hep C. I think I don't know. He looks more awkward leaving a box than getting electrocuted, which maybe that's just like I don't know, like nobody would order a fat guy. You know what I mean? I don't know why that is.
He sells getting electrocuted really well.
Yeah.
And then the idea. So what happens is, there's this match, which is terrible. And who's in it? It's a bunch of guys. It's too many guys.
El Gigante is in this match. I've seen the full match.
I remember seeing this too. I think we did it for the Patreon once.
Yeah, it's brutal.
It's so terrible, and then at the end they strap Abdullah to the electric chair, which is in the center of the ring, and they electrocute him. And then what happens is Foley, Cactus Jack, is like trying to wake him up or something, or trying to see if he's alive, and he wakes up flipping out and beats the shit out of Foley and beats the shit out of anybody coming from the backstage to assist, like any type of jabroni that's trying to calm things down. And I actually thought that was awesome. I think that's really well done, and that's what you do.
It's a cool way to get your heat back for
sure.
sure.
Like dude, with an Abdullah character, like that's cool as hell. It works. Now the coming out of a box, it's like, why the fuck would this guy be in a present box, and then why would he attack someone and then just walk away so easily after? It felt much less, it felt like a shitty segment as opposed to a moment in Abdullah's history, which is what the electric chair thing felt like.
And dude, we make fun of the electrocution thing, but look, I think the electrocution is way less awkward than the Finn Balor rope break or the Seth Rollins taking Rey Mysterio's eye out.
Or the boss man hanging.
Yeah, that's true. Mike, what do you think is more awkward?
I think the electric chair, just because, like the box was his debut, and I think it's a cool debut in terms of like, what the fuck is this, And it's Sting. It's your one of your biggest guys, your franchise guy, and but the fucking electric chair. Here's what you have to remember too, because I didn't realize this until I was watching the show. It's the opening match. They open with this.
Really?
Yeah. And it's
That's kind of
like,
badass.
yeah, the Steiners are in it, Sting's in it, yeah, Eldra fucking Gante, Foley, and it's like, I mean, you got some talented people in there and El Gigante, and it's like, but it's just the cage is hard to see through. It's just a weird mess of a match, and then the thing is, him popping out of the box, you're delivering the promise. Him getting electrocuted, he's not actually electrocuted, so it's like, okay. All right, this happened. And then he's like just in Japan next week giving a young lion hepatitis.
Robert, which one's more awkward?
So when I was at WWE and we were preparing this pay-per-view, because we were putting it up on WWE 24/7, and I'm working with one of the producers, one by the name of Liz, who was the Ooh Chavo at the beginning of Chavo's entrance music. She's the Ooh Chavo girl.
No way.
Yeah, so
Did
she.
Chavo make her react that way naturally, or
I mean,
did they have him in the room for inspiration?
Yeah, he just like daintily takes his shirt off and puts like a shower towel on.
Yeah.
Well, it was actually originally Ooh Chavo.
So I'm in the room and we're fixing this thing up, and we get to the electrocution part, and she just turns to me and says, "Who would ever admit to liking watching wrestling?" And it's what I always think of whenever we bring this up. This electrocution was so fucking stupid, because if you watch the whole match, the lever keeps falling down during the match because they didn't gimmick the prop properly. So they can't get the lever to stay in the position it's supposed to be in. And then you have Abdullah selling this. It looks fucking terrible. It's really, really stupid. Guys coming out of a box. I mean, like Cornette's whole thing is like, if you come out of a box, you're over. And WWE has used it. I mean, they just showed the thing on Canyon, which was not the best example. But whenever you use a guy popping out of a box or a coffin or whatever it is, it becomes a big deal moment. And I remember Abdullah coming out of the box and attacking Sting, and it was like, wow, that was an interesting surprise. Abdullah the Butcher getting electrocuted is a special level of stupid in pro wrestling, where it's just like, I feel embarrassed trying to explain or justify this, other than saying this is a live action cartoon for children, and it should never be taken remotely seriously.
Well, I think you guys are forgetting also that this was a time in the country where people were really rooting for some death penalties, you know?
They
Like,
really were. Yeah, this
legitimately
was
was
for
a
Ted
time where there
Bundy
was
and
like
shit.
3 people where everybody was like, you know, burn this man up. And then so WCW was like, okay, how about this guy? And like it almost makes sense because of the time.
Which means there's a chance the December pay-per-view is going to be Squid Game.
Oh no!
There's a way. By the way, that is our Twitter question is Squid Game related.
Oh, well, obviously I knew that.
Robert, why'd you
I
step
brought
on the
that
Twitter
up.
question?
No, it's fine. But I was going to say, like, there's 2 ways to get over with Cornette: coming out of a box and coming into his wife's box.
God damn it, that's good.
Oh.
You think?
All
Do you
right, so
think
2 and 2. It was we're evenly split as to which.
Oh,
one was
Abdullah!
more
I think
awkward.
Abdullah definitely liked the electric chair. He preferred to sit rather than stand. This was his favorite spot
Sure.
ever.
Yeah, dude, Abdullah reminds me of so many guys I was security guards with. It's crazy.
Do you think you can get the ribs cooked in the electric chair?
I don't know. That's a shirt.
Also, dude, also like props. This is a plus because I didn't have many about Abdullah. But the fact that his tits or his breasts are like on the side of him and by the waist, but his nipples are still where
tits.
nipples go.
They're
Like,
definitely tits.
his nipples still are where all the nipples go, but his tits are like reaching for his ass or something. It's
It's like a
crazy.
neck pillow wrapped around the front of his body. It's perfect.
Yeah.
You know
Wild.
you know what I noticed too? It's very hard to tell whether or not a fat person is sleeping or dead. You know, like you're just like,
Oh, it's frightening. Yeah,
it is kind of frightening. You're like, is this it? Is it over?
If they're sitting in an electric chair in WCW, they're sleeping.
They're sleeping. All right, folks, let's get to our Tales from the Indies. This week we watched the Mike sent us a video which kind of detailed, Hannibal's accusation. Then he won in court about Abdullah giving him hepatitis. It's a really sad video, man.
Yeah,
It's super sad.
very sad.
I mean, I think one of the saddest thing about it is my first note is, of course, Honky Tonk is on the final marquee. Of course, that had to be the final marquee of Honky Tonk there. There's just nothing.
When Hannibal goes,
Imagine quitting what you love and Honky Tonk just being there. It's so
because
weird.
he says he's like, I'm 29 and this is my last match, and then it just says Hannibal Honky Tonk Man on the
Oh,
Hannibal, by the way, gives off major QT vibes. I'm not too familiar with him, but even when he's, look, Abdullah did destroy his dream, and I fully believe that the medication he took to beat the Hep C, which he did eventually beat. I saw a video that was a little more hopeful than this video. He did beat it, and that's great. But it's like the side effects. They took that drug off the market because the side effects were brutal. Like, his life was hell for years, and you can't get that back. If you're especially in terms of wrestling where the years do matter. So I do feel bad for him. But when you hear him talk and he says, like, I could have been a superstar, you go like, I don't know, cut a better promo. Like, this is real and I'm barely being moved,
Wait, I don't know if he could have been a superstar, but he could have been in Ascension or Chronic.
Yes,
that's what
true.
I mean. He was like a big guy that could have been, fucking Mace. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think he could have been a giant star, but
he could have been Festus if he wasn't able to transition into Luke Gallows.
Yes. Well, and also the fact that, he did wrestle Abdullah a bunch of times, and it's very obviously because a booker is going, oh, the name Hannibal versus Abdullah the Butcher, who people thought he was a cannibal. And then you have this wrestler Hannibal that's nothing like Hannibal Lecter. He's, again, like QT Marshall. And it's
he wishes, Scott.
Twist of fate.
I mean, okay, so my thing on this is, like, I feel like I watched the whole match of him versus Abdullah, where Abdullah does this part in the match, and I know there were multiple matches. But
of course, this is the match you watch the full match of.
Yeah.
It's like the saddest, grimiest,
and the Halloween House of Horrors match. So yeah, I know what I am. But anyways, so
he ate candy out of a plastic pumpkin head the whole time.
I fast forward through anything with Danny Garcia, but you show me Abdullah and Hannibal, and it's a full night in, baby. No, but it was So what's interesting is, Abdullah takes a fucking coffee pot, like a legit, and just smashes the coffee pot and all this. It's not even wrestling. Like, that's the thing. It's just fucking disgusting. And I do sympathize with Hannibal for the fact that, like, Abdullah did this shit without telling people, and he apparently did this to a decent amount of people, where he would just wrestle with them, fucking bleed out, because he can't do anything else, so he's just bleeding.
Oh, dude, do you remember that? Did you see that Billy Graham story about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's also, you probably can get hepatitis just looking at his forehead. Like, the blood just jumps out. But anyway,
it was on the menu at his restaurant. It was delicious.
Anyway, what I was gonna say is, but I watched a video with Hannibal commenting on just the coffee cup incident and the match, and he comes off so unlikable because he keeps saying, like, I'm one of the toughest there was, and none of these wrestlers now, they're so soft and babying and crying. They couldn't do what I do. And I'm like, yeah, I'm glad they didn't, because they still get to wrestle.
Also, we really do need to emphasize that Abdullah the Butcher, because I didn't just watch the Hannibal thing. I watched, like, there's a 25-minute video online of people shooting on him.
Yeah.
And there's maybe
which Hannibal made, by the way.
Yes, yeah.
Hannibal cut that together, because the last 10 minutes of that is just Hannibal just fucking showing the X-rays of his body and stuff.
Yeah. But every single guy has stories about how, he would wrestle guys and cut them without ever getting it approved. Like, he would snap razor blades in half, tape them to his fingertips, and then just start poking guys with the razors and making them bleed and bleeding all over them. I mean, he should have been banned from wrestling.
Yeah.
Way before he even got involved with Hannibal.
The thing you have to understand is he would do this shit, but promoters didn't care because bringing Abdullah the Butcher in sold tickets, and he wasn't a permanent fixture. And if you complained about it, you were replaceable. And that was the downside. It's like, if you're going in there and wrestling Abdullah, you're gonna bleed. It's part of it. It's like when the Steiners would wrestle jobbers, and you know that they're just gonna take liberties with them. It's just, oh, it's funny. Or the Road Warriors would do it, or like Bubba Ray was talking about that with Mark Henry, where they were criticizing that the current crop of wrestlers are too soft because, yeah, if you complain that the Dudleys were being too rough with you in the back, they would smack you and be like, you're being a pussy. Like that's what the wrestling culture was versus what it's become now. And when you go look back at it, where the power resided was with who the draws were. And you found ways to forgive their behavior because, all right, you're being soft. This is a tough business where you're pretending to fight one another while wearing spandex.
Yeah, I mean, we never fully talk about how insecure these guys were and the inferiority complex and how Twitch and all these other like vlogs and stuff have saved so many of these wrestlers, because it's like, you know, like I make fun of Adam Cole, but like, you know, he doesn't need to show he's fucking tough. He gets to go on Twitch, and I saw he makes like more than $500,000 a year just off that. It's like he doesn't have to prove to anybody anything, and he's still over. And these dudes just had to like bleed all the time. And in the video I was talking about, Hannibal, he says something. He literally says that he's tougher than Mass Transit, because he's like, Mass Transit didn't even get a full cut on the forehead like I did. It's like, really, dude?
Well, that's fucked up.
Yeah, I don't like Hannibal's chances in the business had he actually made it. I think that dude would have been drummed out.
Hey guys,
pretty quickly.
Guys, without it though, we would have never gotten the worst shoot interviews of all time. So.
I know. I mean, he does get people that you don't often see, and his inability to be a person gets him to ask the questions that you want to know, but you wouldn't ask because you're decent.
Well, I actually, yeah, there's a wrestling podcast that I won't mention that I really like to listen to, just because like the guys are like so bad at interviewing, like it puts the wrestlers at ease. They're like, oh, this guy's not gonna like get me, you know, and because of that, then they get relaxed and like reveal something super interesting. All right, let's move on to the We Must Hate Ourselves World Cup, a doozy, a slobber knocker, if you will. TL Hopper versus Oklahoma. My general note is Oklahoma is worse because bad comedy is worse than bad wrestling. But I mean, Oklahoma debuts in a WCW pinata match that is set up backstage with Vince Russo being George Steinbrenner on The Simpsons and just like yelling stuff at the luchadors. Then he comes out with Dr. Death Steve Williams. You know, TL Hopper is just kind of like a throwback. You know, it's his post-match antics I wrote for TL Hopper are what Brett used to do to save Davey Boy's life. He puts the sponge in, anyway, the plunger in there, and then and it's a little bit, his catchphrase is fucking terrible, which is, you boys get ready to get flushed, which I don't even know what that means. But having said that, you know,
well, he can't say like sucked, like what a plunger does, you know?
Yeah. Well, it's just a reoccurring theme of Vince hating any job that has a strong union, you know?
Wait till he goes after IATSE next month.
So my vote is Oklahoma's worse. What do you think is the worst gimmick, Scott?
Oklahoma is worse. TL Hopper works for me. Yeah, guys who like plumbers are creepy, man. What's that Camp Anawana guy? That guy used to scare the shit out of me.
Zeke the plumber?
Yeah, man.
Yeah, we don't bring that up.
Very, very scary, and that's why we don't bring it up. And yeah, TL Hopper does that for me too. Again, just like last week, where what was it? Duke, the Dumpster Rosie. Is that who we did last week?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm personally a genuine fan of shitty job gimmicks. It works for me because those jobs are terrifying, and I know.
Scott was upset that Abdullah the Butcher wasn't an actual butcher.
Yeah, Well, Abdullah the Butcher looks and acts like a guy I used to work with at the slaughterhouse, which is
Wait, was he one of the dead pigs?
no, we didn't do pigs. It was a Muslim Muslim.
But on the bright side, we know where Scott got his hepatitis. Robert, what's the worst gimmick, Oklahoma or?
All right, so my pick is TL Hopper, and there's a couple of reasons behind this. The first of all, when TL Hopper debuted, this is 96, 97. This is Austin 316. This is not super cartoony WWF. So this is them trying to transition into a more serious product. And then you have the guy who's the wrestling plumber. And Scott brought up the point I was going to make about Zeke the plumber was genuinely terrifying. As a kid, like that, like if you were a kid and watched that was the second episode of Salute Your Shorts.
Oh, wow.
And the reason I bring this up is because they put Salute Your Shorts on Paramount Plus, and I'm like, I want to show my daughter what I watched on Nickelodeon when I was a kid, because the stuff they watch now is shit compared to what the good stuff was. We watched the first episode, I was like, I love this. I'm like, oh, let's go to episode 2. And I was like, oh, no, we can't watch episode 2 because you will never sleep again, because it was legitimately way too terrifying for a small children's television show. So TL Hopper as a gimmick could have worked in that regard. It was terrible. Oklahoma, the reason I can't criticize it, and this is terrible, and that's fine, is, and Russo brought this up, everybody at WWE does a Jim Ross impression. And it's not making fun of him for Bell's palsy. It's making fun of him because that's how he sounds, and he's kind of a shitty human being in a lot of ways. Like we all did JR impressions behind his back in the writer's room in front of Vince.
Is he a shitty human being? That's a little.
He was within the confines of wrestling, not in life, but like in terms of people to deal with, he was like top 10 guy you just don't want to have to deal with. At the point in time when I was working with him, he was very difficult, very combative about everything. And you just you did your voice and like, oh, I don't want to do that. Like it came out.
But
so
Rob,
saying,
can I just say something? You just did the voice without making the face.
Yeah, but because it's audio, and I can.
It's because you can't make the face, but if you got the skill, you do it. You know.
But it's making fun of Jim Ross because Russo and Ferrara hated Jim Ross. Jim Ross, who was the head of talent relations, they didn't get along at the time, and this was them making fun of a guy that was pretty shitty. And Russo, in an interview with Hannibal, talked about how this was more of a rib on Vince because Vince would do the JR impression, and when we were on creative, we did way worse shit to Jim Ross, like the Dr. Heine sketch where Jim Ross almost dies and he has to go in for surgery. They remove his intestines. So Vince chose that the main event of Raw was going to be a segment where Dr. Heine was performing surgery on Jim Ross and pulls JR's head out of his own ass while Jim Ross was in the hospital, not sure if he was going to live or die. So it's really hard to get super agitated about Oklahoma, and it's the kind of stupid heel manager thing that could kind of work in some regard as a parody. Like I felt like something ECW would have done. It was slightly better than like the Billionaire Ted sketches, whereas TL Hopper was a kind of tone deaf character for where the WWF was in 96 and 97, with the rise of Steve Austin in one segment, and then the next segment is here comes the wrestling plumber.
Fair.
Well, can we just say though that Ed Ferrara as JR still looks way better than Ed Ferrara with dreadlocks at that TNA pay-per-view?
Oh, and he was one of the guys from the Matrix. Yeah, that was terrible.
I thought you were gonna say looks better than JR as JR.
Okay, I gotta weigh on this.
All right, Mike. What's right now? It's 2-1 with Oklahoma in the lead.
It's Oklahoma, and I'll tell you
3-1.
All right, so I was watching Smoky Mountain last year, and TL Hopper he was their champion. He was the dirty white boy, Tony Anthony. He has there's this promo with him and Tom Pritchard from the 80s that's fucking awesome. He's a really talented guy, but towards the end of his career or whatever in the mid 90s, and they did a thing where they were having these jobber guys that they could have competitive matches where they beat Barry Horowitz and then they lose to anyone else. And it kind of filled a purpose. There was Alex the Pug Parteau. it was just like you knew what it was, and
The
it was
Goon.
another Jim Johnston phoning it in song of a toilet flushing. I mean, Dan. By the end of this tournament, I will not want Jim Johnson in the Hall of Fame. So that's impressive. Lazy motherfucker sometimes. But the thing with Oklahoma is, I'm fine with inside jokes, but they still have to be universal and work. It's like, if you know that Mike Myers is doing a Lorne Michaels impression when he's doing Dr. Evil, that adds to it, but you don't even need to know that. And it's still just a fun character. But this was just obnoxious. And it's like, he's calling the match, but he's not letting Heenan or Shivani say anything. And he's just being so annoying. And he's only like, the thing is, it's fun when you make fun of somebody and we all have a voice that we do backstage. But the reality is, you often don't have enough material about it. So he does like suplex, but he doesn't have anything else in the impression. So he just keeps doing that. And it's fucking insufferable, man.
So your impression of somebody in an inside joke is never good. You know what I mean? Nobody ever like enjoy. It's like, it's not as bad as like when couples like do couple jokes in front of you, like that only they know, which I'm sure we all have. But it's pretty bad.
Yeah, and so it's not layered enough. The Hopper thing was always going to be at the bottom, and that's where it stayed. But this, being on the main show and all that, and the fact that it is the face. Like, I do think that the face puts it on a level of tastelessness that is just, it comes off. It takes it from being playful to being mean-spirited if you make the face.
Oh, it was fully mean-spirited, and I think that was part of it with them. And it's like, but that's who Russo and Ferrara were, and that was what worked to a large degree. They brought out a lot of the ugliness during the Attitude Era, and they played to the lowest common denominator and base impulses at a time where people loved South Park not for its social satire, but because it was funny to watch kids curse and say homophobic slurs and miss the point of it entirely. That's who Russo and Ferrara's audience were. It was more uncomfortable because you had Dr. Death Steve Williams there, who was really bitter and angry towards Jim Ross at that point in time. And I think that's what kind of hurt JR more than anything else.
Yeah.
It's like, I get that Russo and Ferrara hate me, but like this guy who I've loved for decades, and unfortunately we had to let go, is part of something that's meant to just absolutely eviscerate me. And JR has what to hide behind by saying, I get it, it's wrestling, but this offended my wife, and that made her upset. And it would be egregious if it wasn't for the fact that Vince did it to Jim Ross repeatedly. That's where my degree of outrage isn't as high as it probably should be, just because I've seen the company that paid him for years do really shitty things to him just because they thought it was funny to do really shitty things to him.
Yeah. But based on what you're saying, some of it was justified.
Yeah, some of it was justified. But that's
I've met Jim Ross like 5 times, and grumpy every time.
He's very grumpy. I've met him a couple
He's very grumpy and not protective of his legacy. And I think this is just a quick side note on this. When he was writing his autobiography, he shared some copies with people, and one of the feedbacks was someone who is respected and knows what he's talking about, basically told Jim there was a story about JR doing like hallucinogenic drugs. And he's like, you need to be the John Madden of pro wrestling. Tell your story, but maintain a certain degree of dignity and be the elder statesman.
Oh, that's loser shit.
JR refused to do that and put it in.
Dignity. You find out dignity isn't a thing when you take hallucinogenic drugs. You realize you've been an asshole if you've had dignity.
You find out that fake Razor may be real Razor.
Dignity involves ego, Robert.
But JR needed to be more protective of his legacy. He loves his legacy. He needed to be more protective of it than he was. And sometimes, I think we talked about this when we talked about Dynamite last week, like the red ass JR character from the Conrad podcast kind of started showing up on Dynamite. And it doesn't come across as him playing a character, it just comes across as like a guy who's over this shit sometimes and just wants to lash out and be grumpy.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if he's trying to protect his legacy, he should call less Young Bucks matches.
Well, Mike, hey, let's check in with our Twitterverse this week.
All right. So have you guys watched Squid Game?
No,
Not
no,
yet.
The girls have, but I have.
Partially halfway through it.
Okay. Now there's no spoilers here, but I did ask the Twitterverse, which wrestler would you pick to win Squid Game? So here we go. At Christopher W227. Honestly, any WWE superstar could win Squid Games. They've been playing red light, green light with the way they've been used thanks to 50-50 booking for years. At Dotes McGoats, R-Truth shows up, says, I'm here for the squid eating contest. The first person dies. Then he says, oh, my bad. At Promographic Ken says, QT Marshall, but only if he does the face slapping scene with the mothers of all the forbidden dorks who can hit harder than their sons. At Big Red 10125,
Big Red.
Jerry the King Lawler, he could have his girlfriends teach him all the children's games. At Adam the Hawk, the American Nightmare Cody Rhodes would win, and he'd script a detailed, vaguely racist promo right after about how everyone who died to get Cody to the finish would have wanted it this way. At Andy's Jack 23, early 2000s Triple H because he loved nothing more than burying everyone. At Belly Flow, you need someone strong. You need someone with ruthless aggression. And most importantly, you need someone willing to turn on their friends. Well, it's the big show. It's time to win the Squid Game. At Chom1AK, seeing a Squid Game has 455 different competitors, it would have to be someone from an AEW dark taping for the numbers to be comparable. At KPI,
Even that pissed Scott off. I love it.
KBI Javier, in 10 years when Vince sees the show, we are probably going to find out. At David Stegon, Bret Hart would say Bret Hart would win. And finally, at Huskers 88, if you put a gun to my head, Arn Anderson.
That's funny. We all know it's Reggie.
Best fans in the world. Best fans in the world. No Dynamite this week, folks. So it's an hour in and we're at high spot, low spot, which is the shortest episode we've done in a while. I'm pretty impressed. High spots. I'm going to go with Awesome Kong getting into the TNA Hall of Fame. You know, hopefully she gets in the WWE Hall of Fame. She's already in the wrestling. She should be in the Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame. This is somebody who deserves more recognition, especially, you know, I sent, I think like, you guys at some point like a video of like just fucking what was going on with the like the 2010s, you know, WWE women's division. I mean, it's like prehistoric, but at that time, Gail Kim and Awesome Kong and to a lesser extent, I guess like ODB and Mickey James, they were trying to actually, you know, wrestle. So that's my high spot this week. Scott, what's your high spot?
Ooh, my high spot is the G1 is winding down, and I am getting excited about it because that's like the layout of the tournament. That's what it does. It no matter what gets you excited about it, and you know it's not a huge lineup of guys. Tonga beat Okada this morning. I don't know if I was supposed to say spoiler before that, but that was huge and changes the bracket, and Jeff Cobb's been in a bunch of great matches. It's just every match.
Cobb is so good.
I've watched the G1 the last 3 mornings, I think, and it's been genuinely exciting. Every match that is that you know is in the tournament.
If you had to give our listeners top 3 G1 matches so far, what would you say from this year's tournament?
Ooh, Okada and Sonata had a really good match.
Mm-hmm.
Ibushi and Ishii had a really good match.
I saw that. That was great. Yeah.
Zack Sabre Jr. and Shingo.
All right. So check those out, guys. I'm going to check out Zack Sabre Jr. and Shingo right after this. Robert, what was your high spot this week?
So my high spot, because it brought me so much joy to see, was Tony Khan accidentally leaking the Full Gear card. If you didn't see it, he was doing an interview for Forbes. They took a picture of him and he was holding his notebook, And on the notebook was scribbled out the entire Full Gear card that he was planning. And there's something kind of endearing and adorable that he's handwriting like the card for the show at the Jaguars games. Like he had to go to work with dad. And
he didn't have his action figures with him. So
exactly. But I think that's just hilarious. And then it's out there and the card looks fucking awesome. And I hope
that's
that
the
they
best
don't
part about it, man.
It. Like,
yeah, the card's good and we're all like, dope. Just full speed ahead.
Looks good, but I just picture him sitting in the corner while everyone's watching the football game and he's writing on his notes, like, who's Britt Baker going to face? Like, it's the kind of thing you would do if you were like 8 years old and got dragged to a football game you didn't want to be at. And then it's out there and it's leaked. And I kind of just love
do you guys still do fantasy cards though sometimes?
No, but I go to football games and play under the bleachers like I used to.
Me versus my stepdad.
And by the way, did we kind of skip over the fact that how amazing would it be to see Jim Ross on mushrooms? I mean, it's fucking, like just him, like seeing Steve Williams reappear out of a burning bush, being like, he's going to finally end me. He's going to finally end me.
It's definitely more comfortable than him calling a Riho match.
Yeah, that's true. Oh, this slobber knocker is a nogger slopper.
I'm being chased by a scalded dog.
All right, what was your high spot this week, Mike?
I'm gonna
you can't say Squid Game again.
Robert, I think it was a work, but I think it was a great work. I think that the amount of media people, I think Tony Khan himself is that media savvy? No, but I think he's surrounded by a lot of people that are, and they knew they'd get buzzed this way. And also the fact that they did officially announce Page versus Omega for Full Gear. And I love that because, a criticism I've had of the company is they wait till the last 2 fucking weeks to say when a match is going to happen, let alone even like some of their main events. This is a main event that deserves a proper build and a few weeks of pushing. And I'm glad we already know what it is. Sometimes we should, like, I don't think they should always do like the thing with Rock and Cena where it's a year out. But I love when, and it used to be the case with like WWE, you knew what the WrestleMania match was going to be the night after the Rumble. And now you don't because the booking sucks. But I kind of love when things happen because they should. And I know, Scott, you're really excited about the match and knowing that it's actually going to happen and that they're building towards it now and they'll have time to do it is fucking great.
Well, what's shitty is WWE does this, but only for Crown Jewel. It's the only pay-per-view where they announce like the card so far in advance that they completely erase the purpose of Extreme Rules.
Well, we kind of knew Edge and Roman after Royal Rumble last year, right?
Kind of, and then it wound up not being that. It wound up being a triple threat. But it's more like the whole card. Like we knew the majority of the Crown Jewel card a few weeks ago. But I think just to Mike's point, what's kind of fun right now is it's almost entirely on the AEW side, but they're trying to reignite like the Monday Night Wars in so many different ways that's going to benefit the fans. Like WWE is doing this extended SmackDown that's 2.5 hours. So Tony Khan's like, I hope we beat you guys. And then just for fun, we're going to put Daniel Bryan and Minoru Suzuki on our YouTube show at 9:30 just to fuck with you even more. Like that's fun. And I kind of hope it pokes the bear and wakes Vince up a little bit because he's been in a coma for the last 20 plus years. And if there's one thing that motivates him, it's spite. And that's kind of fun to see.
Doctors say if he wakes from the coma, he'll die. So,
hey man, sleeping on network money is, it's pretty comfortable sleep, brother.
Oh, what do you got? Predictions. Rampage, it doesn't beat that last half hour of SmackDown.
I don't think so after this last week because they got their ass kicked this week.
I don't know, but it's FS1.
Well, yeah, but I think SmackDown it gets a low rating, but it still does better than Rampage has been doing.
Well, yeah, because the main event, the last half hour of SmackDown is commercial free and it's Brock.
Oh, right, I gotta run to pee, guys. But hit everybody with your low spots while I pee.
Okay, man. Man, it's Robert. Do you have a low spot this week?
I do. On Monday Night Raw, which is just a low spot of the week.
I think that every low spot you've ever had has been Monday Night Raw related.
Well, it is because we don't. But the honest low spot is we just don't cover what
No,
was the
yeah,
flagship
yeah.
show of pro wrestling. Like we sit and we dissect AEW to the point where everyone's like, oh, you guys all hate AEW except Scott. We're like, no, we all like AEW. It's just that's what we talk about. If we broke down Raw, you'd be like, wow, you guys really fucking hate the WWE.
Yeah, we like AEW enough to talk about it a bunch.
Well, it's what the audience wants to hear in general. It's like that's what they said. But what was really it's the low spot for me is Big E as WWE champion. They're trying everything they can, and the audience is not accepting it. And there was a real low point there where he was in the ring and he did not feel like the WWE champion. He felt like a mid-card guy. And WWE has tried to use their PR machine. They sent him to the Notre Dame, Iowa game. They had him do a video for it as well as be in the audience. They had him go to the Fury Wilder fight and he did a voiceover of a video package. They're trying to make him a big deal. And the way he's being presented on Raw is doing him no favors, and the audience is already hip to it, and they're kind of over Big E. And it sucks that he's worked so hard for so long to get there, and they're treating him like a mid-card guy who holds the title, which they did when I was there when it was Rey Mysterio. They did it with Punk when he first won the title, and you're setting this guy up for failure. And it's just kind of a letdown because he's a really talented dude who does deserve better. And I'm worried they're going to very quickly cut bait on him.
All right. Who's left? Scott? Mike?
Mike, you got one?
Yeah, I got one. A little preview for what we're talking about this weekend, but
next weekend.
The Undertaker's hair in this Escape the Undertaker.
Have you already seen it? You've already watched it?
Oh yeah, man. I saw, like I said, I saw it, and then I watched 2 hours of Abdullah the Butcher shit in a row. So I'm mind fucked. But his hair is the most disgusting thing I've seen ever. Just even the Undertaker still like being on screen in any capacity, it's just uncomfortable. There were parts of the. I'm not going to give my review now. It's a fun watch. You guys will, I think, enjoy it more than to the top, which isn't hard. But yeah, man, that fucking hair will haunt me forever.
It's got to be better than Roads to the Top.
It is better than Roads to the Top because also, it is choose your own adventure. So you could just make bad choices like WWE booking, and it's over in like 10 minutes.
All right, well, I'm looking forward to that. Scott, you already did your low spot?
Nah, man, I don't know if I have a low spot. There was no Dynamite, nothing really happened.
I will do one. I'll do one for both of us then, and that is the Rock rapping. I don't know if you've seen.
God, man, I hated that so much.
Dude, it was so bad.
I used to have the WWE volume, whatever, where he had that song about pie. Mm-hmm. And as a child, I thought it was okay.
If you ever wondered whether or not The Rock had any white in him, this rap sure proves it.
He was good in that Wyclef song years ago too, so I'm surprised. I mean, all you had to do was say his catchphraise and it worked. But
do you think there's good Samoan rappers? This just might be the Samoan side of him.
I mean, the Usos talk like they grew up in Compton, even though
I know they all did. Like Yokozuna does too. Yokozuna would be like, "Yeah, man, I was from the hood."
Yeah. Well, I guess I'm not sure the politics.
Yeah,
like on an Abdullah the Butcher show, this was the most culturally inappropriate moment of the entire episode.
Can Samoans act hood, as it were? We will have Cornell West on the next podcast to discuss.
Yes, don't you remember Making a Difference, Fatu?
Yeah. Was that after the Sultan or before the Sultan?
That was before the Sultan. This was after he was the head shrinker. It's like, look, I wear shoes. What a business.
All right, folks. Well, next week we got Bright Side of the Ring, the roast of Alexa Bliss. So Bright Side for Alexa. Show and Hell, Alexa Bliss's This Is Your Life segment, which I don't know if you guys have seen this before.
The Bailey This Is Your Life as hosted.
Yes, it's Bailey. It's Bailey This Is Your Life, which Alexa Bliss is the antagonist for.
Can we just watch Roads to the Top instead, please?
Wait, what is it?
Scott.
Can we just lick Abdullah the Butcher's forehead instead?
We're gonna do anonymous for bad gimmicks next week. It's a fun one. Anonymous GM versus Arachnaman. which is
Oh,
yeah.
the worst gimmick. We got Dynamite or Dud. And then, as always, High Spot, Low Spot. Folks, follow us on Twitter, on Instagram. Join our Patreon. I really do think we have the best Patreon deal in the biz. Scott, what do you got?
Oh, I am, along with Zach Amico, going to be at Skankfest I think it's in Dallas, Texas, November 4th through the 8th or some horse shit. I don't know. Look it up.
Wait, what is this?
It's called Skankfest. It's a thing.
I've been writing some roast jokes for Soder.
Oh, nice. Lovely. Hell yeah.
You should be on that fucking dais.
Yeah, well, I'm writing some for some other folk.
Yeah.
Also, I was on this podcast, I Hate the Scene. They put it up on YouTube, and I did some Kenny Omega worship on it. So if you look that up, you could see me worshiping Kenny at some point on that. Yeah.
Awesome.
That's it for me.
Robert?
You can follow me on Twitter at WWEcreative_ISH. I also, good buddy of mine, Jamie Iovine, is doing a pro wrestling pay-per-view event called the Halloween Hootenanny on October 26th. It's going to have former roast victim Gangrel is on that show, so that'll be a hell of a lot of fun. You can check that out at hootenanny.eventbrite.com. It's also streaming on Fight TV. I feel like such a whore promoting something, but hey, it should be fun.
Yeah, dude, this is what Halloween is about. Like fun, Halloween-y, gimmicked pay-per-views, just a good time. Be
Love
a kid,
Halloween. Favorite
enjoy
holiday.
yourselves. I get into wrestling more around Halloween because I feel, I'm reminded more of childhood.
Also, for anyone who ever bitches about wrestlers living their gimmick, we just shot William Shatner into space.
Mike.
Oh man, and the stewardess has some stories about that.
Wait till Elon Musk takes the Undertaker to hell.
with that machine he was going to use to save those cave kids in Thailand. I was going to say, yeah. So next Wednesday is also no Dynamite. So how should we review Dynamite? Should we?
Oh, well, we should be doing this Saturday's Dynamite.
We'll do the Saturday show, and we'll figure out other.
Okay,
things.
all right, sounds good.
I mean, we could do a Dynamite / Rampage review next week. We'll throw in Rampage too.
Yeah, guys, it's wrestling. Tommy Dreamer might finally shoot Paul Heyman. You know, we might have.
And miss. Anyways, I'm on the Facebook page for WrestleRoasts all the time. Love the people there. On Instagram is Mike Lawrence Comedy. So there you go.
All right, Zach.
Wash your hands.
Wash your damn hands. We'll see you next week.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.